Today's case is a heavy one because this isn't just a story about violence. It's a story about how hope can be brutally snuffed out right in front of everyone. We're used to thinking that tragedies happen in deserted alleys, away from the world's eyes. But this case, it happened in the place this generation knows best, a live stream.
Wait, are you saying the murder happened while hundreds or even thousands of people were watching exactly?
Exactly. On September 14th, 2020, behind that glowing phone screen, hundreds of fans were waiting to see that familiar Highland girl, Lamu. They expected to watch her gather medicinal herbs, hear her sing to the mountains, or simply see that signature smile of hers, the one that could melt ice and snow. But that night, the screen didn't show mountain songs. It showed piercing screams, the thud of heavy objects hitting the ground, and a fire so terrifying it could haunt someone for a lifetime. In this episode, we won't dwell on the gruesome details. The real question is, how could a woman who was already divorced, already sought help, already tried to rebuild her life, still fail to escape the shadow of long-term domestic abuse? Before we enter that dark night, we have to talk about Lamu, because only by understanding how deeply she loved life can you truly grasp how unforgivable the evil of that night was. Lamu, whose real name was Amu Chu, lived in a small mountain village in Jinchuan County, Aba Prefecture, Sichuan. If you search for her photos, you'll see she wasn't the kind of polished, heavily made-up, big influencer. She always wore worn traditional clothes, her cheeks flushed with the typical Highland red, and dirt from harvesting cordyceps might still cling between her fingers. Her videos had a kind of magic. She'd show the camera mushrooms she'd just picked from the mountains, still glistening with dew. She'd cook simple instant noodles at several thousand meters above sea level while cheerfully waving at distant snow-capped peaks. Her signature line was, "I don't live to make videos, I make videos to live." Even though her life was harsh, even though she had to raise 2 children alone, even though she sometimes had to camp alone in the mountains for months searching for precious herbs, her eyes always shone with an unyielding light. But here's the chilling truth of real crime. Behind those videos with tens of thousands of likes, behind those radiant smiles, a shadow was always lurking. That shadow was Lamu's ex-husband, Tang Lu. If you only look at social media, you might think Lamu lived in a paradise untouched by the world. But the reality? Behind her smiles, she may have just endured another act of violence.
This contrast is the most heartbreaking. Why didn't she run away?
That's the core of it. Many people ask, if she was being beaten, why didn't she divorce him or leave? You must understand, for victims of long-term control, leaving is never a simple action. It's a dangerous psychological and practical battle. Let's go back to that night, September 14th, 2020. Lamu was live streaming from her father's old house, chatting casually. She seemed fine, but halfway through, rapid footsteps echoed outside the frame. Her expression froze instantly. Then the live stream began to shake violently. In the background, her terrified cries for help were heard, along with the sound of liquid being poured. It was gasoline. Her ex-husband Tang Lu stormed in with gasoline and a weapon. In full view of the live stream, he poured the pungent liquid over Lamu.
That's outright premeditated murder.
Exactly. This wasn't a moment of impulse. It was a cruel, premeditated act meant to strip her of everything. With the click of a lighter, the live stream was consumed by flames, followed by a haunting silence. I'm telling this story not to show cruelty or satisfy curiosity. I want to reveal how, even when a woman has fought with everything she has to save herself, an abuser can exploit gaps in perception and the system to carry out a long-term, slow-motion murder. We need to dissect this extreme possessiveness and twisted psychology. Why do some people see a woman saying no as an offense to their ego, turning it into a sick, destroy everything mentality? Are you ready? Let's peel back that filter and see the most real and most urgently necessary to confront reality. In many cases, the victim is just a name, but Lamu left behind hundreds of videos, letting us witness her life firsthand. When we talk about Lamu, we must first understand one word, Gerzan Flower. In Tibetan, it represents happiness. The flower looks delicate, yet it can take root in the harsh, high-altitude environment. Lamu was that kind of flower.
I've seen her videos. She always smiled so sweetly.
Her life seemed really pure, didn't it? And that's precisely the deceptive part. If you think she was on vacation, you'd be wrong. Lamu's life was extremely difficult. To support a household with an ailing father and 2 children, she spent months each year alone in the high-altitude wilderness above 4,000 meters. Among the thin air and rocky terrain, she slept in drafty plastic shelters, ate dry biscuits, drank from mountain streams, just to collect cordyceps and fritillaria, the family's sole source of income. Lamu was far from weak. She spent her life resisting poverty and defying fate, so questioning why she didn't fight back is an insult to her character. The only thing she couldn't escape was violence disguised as love. Next, we need to enter a hard-hitting discussion, the cultural context. Why, even after Lamu sought help and reported abuse so many times, did this tragedy still happen? First, the invisible walls of domestic matters. In many people's subconscious, a husband and wife fighting still exists in a gray area outside the law. When Lamu sought help with her bruised face, the typical response was, "For the sake of the children, go back and live together."
Wait, the injuries are all on the face. Isn't this an intentional assault?
Yes, but under the traditional mediation logic at the time, the guiding principle was, better to dismantle 10 temples than break up one marriage. People believed arresting the husband would destroy the family without realizing he was a ticking time bomb. Second, the choose one moral coercion. In traditional views, divorced women face immense social pressure. Whispers like, "Why does he only hit you?" Or, "Are you not gentle enough?" act like invisible needles, pinning the victim firmly within a violent marriage. Now let's talk about the man, Tang Lu. To many neighbors, he even appeared to care about his wife, but that care was extreme possessiveness and coercive control. He had been with Lamu since she was 18. To him, Lamu was not a partner with an independent soul. She was his private property.
I heard he had multiple records of domestic violence.
This was over a decade of torment. Tang Lu followed a very typical cycle of domestic abuse. First, tension building. He would become dark and irritable if Lamu said a few extra words to fans on live stream or stayed too long at her parents' home. Then came the violent outburst, even during Lamu's pregnancy. Finally, the so-called honeymoon phase, when he would weep, kneel, and even threaten suicide, claiming, "I love you so much I couldn't control myself." Lamu often softened for the sake of giving her children a complete family. But remember, the so-called honeymoon phase was just the abuser recharging for the next assault. Lamu ultimately realized he would never change. In 2020, she mustered the courage to file for divorce and return to her parents' home. She thought that obtaining the divorce certificate would let her take her children and live in the sunlight, but she underestimated how crazed a man with extreme control issues could become when he lost his power. Tang Lu had threatened, "If you divorce me, I'll kill your whole family." At that time, Lamu thought it was just an angry remark. Before that nightmarish September, Lamu had actually finalized her divorce. She moved back into her father's old house, began trying to rebuild her life, and even said in a video, "From now on, I only rely on myself." That was the last bright chapter of her life. She thought she had finally reached safety.
This is the most painful part. She has done everything right. She has escaped.
Yes, she called the police, divorced him, worked hard. She did everything right. What comes next is extremely difficult. We are about to see how justice was absent at the critical moment. Many criminal psychologists talk about a concept called separation lethality. It means that for victims of long-term domestic abuse, the most dangerous moment is often not during the abuse itself, but when the victim truly decides to leave. For someone like Tang Lu, Lamu's independence was a direct challenge to his absolute power. He could not tolerate her living freer, more beautifully after leaving him.
So that night wasn't a sudden loss of control, right?
Absolutely not. Don't be fooled by the crime of passion excuse. Before September 14th, 2020, Tang Lu had already shown clear signs of premeditation, sinister messages on social media, tools prepared in advance. He wasn't going to talk. He came with extreme intent to destroy. That night, Lamu was live streaming from her father's old house, greeting fans happily. Outside the frame, Tang Lu approached step by step through the night. He knew the environment intimately and that Lamu was completely unguarded. Around 8:50 p.m., the peaceful live stream was shattered by a violent door slam and a man's roar.
What did the fans see at that moment?
The video began to shake violently. In the background, Lamu's terrified cries for help were heard. Tang Lu rushed in, poured flammable liquid over her, and ignited it in a matter of moments. The live stream was instantly engulfed in flames. Even worse, after starting the fire, he stood armed to prevent anyone from intervening. And Lamu, at that moment No. After sustaining severe injuries, Lamu clung to life for another 16 days, displaying a heartbreaking resilience. Lamu was rushed to the hospital, and during the emergency treatment, she showed incredible determination. Even in extreme weakness and occasional moments of consciousness, her first concern was, are the children safe? Until her final moments, her deepest care remained protecting her family. Now, we must confront the point that left everyone reflecting and outraged. Why was this tragedy not prevented in advance? In the months leading up to the crime, Lamu had repeatedly tried to seek protection and report abuse. Yet the reality at the time was regrettable. Scene 1. When threatened with a weapon, police intervention was often dismissed as a domestic dispute, resulting only in a verbal warning. Scene 2. Even after sustaining serious physical injuries, when conflicts spilled across households or escalated into disturbances, the resolution was still largely limited to administrative mediation.
If this had been two strangers on the street, with weapons the law would have acted immediately. Why does labeling it a marriage suddenly seem to dilute the severity of the violence?
This is the heart of the problem. In past social mindsets and grassroots governance, the words domestic matter often became an invisible barrier, delaying legal intervention and prompting witnesses to remain silent. Some abusers exploited this lag in perception with precision, gradually developing contempt for the rules until they slid completely into criminality. On September 30th, 2020, on the eve of the traditional family reunion festival, Lamu passed away. Her death caused a huge stir online. Countless people began sharing her videos, and debates on how to effectively enforce the anti-domestic violence law surged into public attention. The public began to realize, if a woman so proactive in seeking her own safety could not be fully protected, what hope was there for the countless other victims trapped in silence? Lamu's life ended that autumn, but the trial for justice had only just begun. The eyes of society focused on how the law would rule, waiting to see if this withered Gerzan flower would receive a fair reckoning. The trial itself became a battle between legal principles and the limits of human morality. On October 14th, 2021, exactly 1 year after Lamu's passing, the case went to court. In the courtroom, Tang Lu still attempted to use emotion to excuse himself.
How could he still be so presumptuous to defend himself? The evidence is already right there for everyone to see, isn't it?
This is a classic tactic. Tang Lu's defense focused on 2 points. First, claiming it was a crime of passion, and second, trying to shift responsibility onto Lamu. He argued that Lamu's coldness after the divorce, along with his love for the children and desire to reconcile, drove him to lose control. This tired narrative of love turning into hate was clearly an attempt to mask the premeditated nature of his murder. But this time, the public didn't buy it, and the law no longer stayed silent. In court, Tang Lu wept and expressed remorse. But the prosecution presented abundant objective evidence: the burned live stream equipment, injury reports, and records of Lamu's repeated pleas for help. These pieces of evidence crushed his lies, making it clear to the judge that this was an extremely cruel act of revenge. On the same day, the Intermediate People's Court of the Aba Tibetan and Chang Autonomous Prefecture in Sichuan delivered its first instance verdict. Tang Lu was found guilty of intentional homicide, sentenced to death, and deprived of his political rights for life.
Although Ram couldn't come back, this outcome at least ensured that the demon received the punishment it deserved.
Exactly. Though Tang Lu subsequently appealed, the Sichuan High People's Court ultimately upheld the original verdict. On July 23, 2022, Tang Lu was lawfully executed. While the trial concluded, the reflection did not end. Many asked, if the earlier knife threats and assaults had been met with strong legal intervention, if domestic matter had not served as a shield, could this tragedy have been prevented? Lamu's case greatly propelled the national discussion on implementing the anti-domestic violence law. People realized that the law must become an effective shield in practice.
So, Ram used her life to give all domestic violence victims a chance to speak out.
Justice did come, but at an incredibly heavy cost. We also need to remember those who survived. Lamu's father suffered a tremendous psychological blow, and her two children had to face the brutal truth of their family. When the wave of attention online subsided, the broken family was left to quietly piece themselves back together. A verdict may be only a few pages long, but the pain lasts a lifetime. The law has now given its answer, but before we close, we want to shift the final spotlight back to Lamu, to talk about how to remember her and the changes her life inspired in the world. Every time I tell a story like this, it leaves me drained. But before we turn off the camera, I don't want you to leave carrying only anger and fear. What I want you to remember is Amu Chu, the girl in the remote mountains facing the camera saying, "Today is another day full of hope." If we only remember the pain, it's as if the abuser erased her existence. We must ensure her life continues in another way.
Yes, she is actually a very excellent blogger. If all this hadn't happened, she would surely be living a happy life with her family by now.
Exactly. Lamu loved the freedom of those mountains above all. Even today, many people still leave messages under her videos, not to gawk at tragedy, but to tell her, "Lamu, the snow-capped mountains are beautiful today. Thank you for giving me strength." What she left behind is a resilient life force. She showed us that even in the harshest conditions, everyone still has the right to pursue beauty and express love. This sincerity and passion for life is something no act of violence can truly erase. Lamu's sacrifice sent ripples through the real world. The phrase, "domestic violence is not a family matter," is gradually becoming a societal consensus. Law enforcement is now more resolute in intervening in such cases, and more people are willing, when they hear cries for help from a neighbor, to pick up the phone and call the authorities. Every moment of attention that an individual receives while calling for help is like a line of defense built by society. Social media has, to some extent, become a watchdog, ensuring cries for help aren't easily ignored. But we must also recognize that in countless corners, many victims remain trapped in similar circumstances. They may not have a voice, and their cries may be drowned out by the noise of reality. We must ask ourselves, do we only pay attention when tragedy has already occurred? Could we act at the very first sign of danger?
This is precisely the reason why we tell this story, isn't it? So that there won't be another Ram like this in the future.
If this story can help even one person in danger realize, "This is not my fault, I have to leave," or prompt society to take early intervention more seriously, then sharing it has served its purpose. Lamu once hoped her children would receive a good education and that her father would stay healthy. Today, many people are helping protect that love for her family in her place. And that's today's story, a story about dreams, resilience, and society's commitment to justice. Thank you for listening with me today. Please remember, whatever you are going through, you are not alone. Take care of yourself. If you support this kind of in-depth social awareness, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's continue seeking the truth while maintaining respect for life. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.